The autumn of 1888 was one in English history that will never be forgotten. You may have seen several documentaries on the topic, and you'll find so many videos on YouTube about it. It is considered to be one of the first cases involving a serial killer. He was presented in the media as Jack the Ripper, the infamous wretched person that terrorized the East End in London. But why is it so interesting to continue to talk and debate about him? Well, it is not as if Jack the Ripper disappeared, as most of the Ripperologists and historians say. The Ripper, as a consequence, continues to walk on London streets and the streets of so many other cities. Approximately 137 women across the world are killed every day. And even though this case concerns what we may consider a feminicide, people who kill go after different genders and agendas. Jack the Ripper still exists in our society, not as a sole person, but as an evil that has become a real problem. Let's go back in history. What is held to be the first murder by Jack the Ripper happened on August 31st, 1888. The body of Mary Ann NICHOLS was discovered at 3 a.m. between the labyrinth-like alleyways with minimal lighting. Her eyes wide open and a fatal wound on her throat. Dr. Llewellyn, who arrived at the scene, noticed that because her limbs were still warm, the killing must have happened but just an hour prior to his arrival. After being taken to the mortuary, they discovered another wound in her abdomen. The police began rapidly to blame the local gangs, stating that they tend to commit those awful crimes in order to scare or blackmail the locals. Tragically, just a few days later, Annie Chapman was discovered dead on September 8th. Similar to Mary Ann, her body was severely wounded to what is described as having been mutilated. In a backyard, alone, but with just some of her personal items by her side. 2 pills, a torn envelope, a piece of muslin, and a comb. Many argue the profession of the women. The truth is that whether they were involved in what is known as the oldest profession or if they were simple beggars, any woman that didn't have a husband by her side and lived by herself in the impoverished area with no regular job and or in a compromising situation was considered, wrongfully sometimes, a sex worker and therefore in danger. There the police concluded, and as many other historians agree, the women were prostitutes, and the madman was on the streets after them. Then came what is known as a double event, where the Ripper murdered 2 women in the same night, Elizabeth Stride and Katrin EDDOWES. Liz Stride, a Swedish-born woman with great experience in domestic service, and Katrin EDDOWES, a hard-working woman and a mother with a disadvantage that many unprivileged Victorians suffered, of being illiterate. The man, or whoever Jack the Ripper was, did certainly follow a pattern to select his victims, and it wasn't precisely their occupation, but the ones that had fallen into a pitfall, the destitutes, simply women who were easy to harm. This time, the person committing the crimes harmed the victims, especially poor Katrin, in the lowest way possible. As a night watcher described after seeing the body, here is another woman cut to pieces. Her face, what is said to be our most important possession, her identity, her organ of emotion, severely injured. Several weeks after the tragedy, the killer struck again. This time, it wasn't on the streets, but in the lodgings of another woman. This time, a younger woman. Jack the Ripper took his time to prove that he could do so much more than kill, but to create a sense that a demon had escaped hell and could come for you at any time in the peaceful environment of your own bedroom. The once lively Mary Kelly had become one of the first women killed, if not first, to have been photographed in a crime scene. All these cold-blooded cases by the Ripper fall into a bizarre category of entertainment or guilty pleasure, and we as a society, and yes, I include myself, fall in a strange interest in serial killings. But we should understand that the victims were people like us. Therefore, as a society, we should not reduce the crimes to simply explanations by the media. Yes, some of the 5 victims may have been Victorian fallen women, as popular culture tend to depict them, but they were wives, daughters, friends, and sisters. When we neutralize the crimes committed by the killer as something more for mere entertainment, reading and portraying serial killers as something of pure demonic, unreal, or even of supernatural nature, without comprehending that they were also as human as their victims, we idolize and normalize that behavior. As Dr. Scott Bones says in Psychology Today, that stylizes the serial killer image in the news and entertainment media, enabling the public to delve into the world of macabre and sinister. Again, it is important not to forget horrible facts as what happened in 1888 in Whitechapel, London, but see it as history we can learn, facts that happened and continue happening in our society, a society that sometimes adds to the environment where those kinds of killers are created and where those kinds of killings are committed. Most researchers have concluded that the lack of empathy makes a serial killer, and us reading about those crimes and learning to have empathy towards the victims is the best we have at our disposal to have a healthier space to live and coexist. If you are interested in reading about Jack the Ripper and the murders committed by him, I recommend reading The Fight by Hallie Rubenhold. It is a marvelous book on the story of the Ripper victims, a great investigation into the lives of those women that the world and the media forgot to treat with kindness, even long after their death.